Obviously, Titanic is a fictional movie about two gorgeous people who fall in love, but as everyone knows, the iconic James Cameron film is sadly based on fact. The real-life RMS Titanic sunk in the Atlantic Ocean on April 15, 1912, after hitting an iceberg during its maiden voyage to New York City. Over 2,000 passengers were on the ship, many of whom were depicted in the film. The majority of Titanic's characters actually have real-life counterparts, many of whom sadly died on board, and some of whom lived to tell the tale of the ship's tragic sinking. Though Jack and Rose were completely invented, but stories of the real people on board the Titanic are so interesting. In this video, we are going to see 30 real-life passengers featured on screen, along with their Hollywood counterparts. The video is going to be very interesting, so please watch till the end. Captain Edward J. Smith. The ship's maiden journey from Southampton to New York was slated to be the British naval officer's final voyage before retirement. Known for his calmness and stoicism, Smith was White Star Line's senior captain and was often dubbed the millionaire's captain for his popularity among the wealthy. He died when the ship sank. He was survived by his wife and their daughter. Bernard Hill played the Titanic's captain, Edward J. Smith, in the 1997 movie. Bruce Ismay. Joseph Bruce Ismay was the chairman and managing director of White Star Line. He survived the sinking of Titanic and later testified before the U.S. Senate in an inquiry about the disaster. In the days after the sinking, the press harshly criticized him for saving himself while women and children were still aboard the ship. He testified that he only left the ship after helping others into lifeboats and confirming that there were no more women or children in sight. However, eyewitness reports contradicted his assertion. Joseph Bruce Ismay was played by Jonathan Hyde. Thomas Andrews. Played by Victor Garber, Thomas Andrews was the shipbuilder in charge of building Titanic. Accordingly, it's Andrews who informs Rose halfway through the movie that the ship has 1 hour before it sinks and that there aren't enough lifeboats for everyone on board. As depicted in the movie, the real Andrews handed out life jackets and tried to help as many people as possible get to safety. Andrews perished on the Titanic and was reportedly last seen in the first-class smoking room, where the film depicts its final shot of him. However, others claim to have seen him on the ship's deck throwing chairs to people in the water. Margaret Brown. Kathy Bates played Margaret Brown in the movie, commonly known as the unsinkable Molly Brown. She earned her nickname because she urged the crewmen in charge of her lifeboat to go back and rescue more passengers. In the film, Brown is depicted frequenting first-class gatherings, notably the dinner scene featuring Rose, Jack, and other prominent passengers. Accounts vary as to whether or not the lifeboat went back, but Brown's story took on a life of its own. After her death in 1932, she became known as the unsinkable Molly Brown, due to her assistance to others during and after the sinking of the Titanic. John Jacob Astor. John Jacob Astor was not only the richest passenger on the Titanic, but was also one of the richest men in the world at the time of the sinking. Astor was played by Eric Braeden in the film and first appears during the dinner party scene when Rose introduces Jack to him, and Madeline JJ was last depicted in the movie's third act, standing by the Titanic's grand staircase as water rushes in. His body was recovered 10 days after the sinking, which was eventually recovered and identified by initials sewn into his jacket. Madeline Force. Madeline Force was John Jacob Astor's second wife, played by Charlotte Chatton. As depicted in the movie, she was pregnant at the time of the Titanic voyage. She and her husband were on their way back to America, so the baby would be born there. She survived the sinking and gave birth 4 months later. Benjamin Guggenheim. Benjamin Guggenheim, played by Michael Ensign in Titanic, was a wealthy American businessman who boarded the ship with his mistress, Leontine Aubert. In the movie's third act, when asked by a steward to put on a life jacket, Guggenheim declines and says, "We are dressed in our best and are prepared to go down as gentlemen." His final scene in the film depicts him and Giglio sitting by the grand staircase as water rushes toward them. In reality, Guggenheim uttered the same words, as he and Giglio changed into their most formal attire before both perishing in the sinking. Leontine Aubert. Guggenheim's mistress, Leontine Aubert, was played by Fanny Brett. Although the film refers to her as Madame Aubert, her real-life surname was Aubert. Aubert's only scene comes as she converses with Guggenheim during the first-class dinner party. In real life, Aubert and Segesser escaped the sinking in Lifeboat 9. Cosmo Duff Gordon. Played by Martin Jarvis, Cosmo Duff Gordon was an Olympic silver medalist in fencing who survived the sinking. Like Bruce Ismay, he drew criticism for seeming to violate the women and children first rule established by White Star crew. He died in 1931 at age of 68. Lucy, Lady Duff Gordon. British fashion designer Lucille, Lady Duff Gordon, was the wife of Sir Cosmo and accompanied him on the Titanic. Played in the film by Rosalind Ayres, she can be seen alongside her husband during the first-class dinner party. Rose waves to the pair and mentions to Jack that Lucille designs naughty lingerie among her many talents and is very popular with the royals. Lucille survived the sinking with Sir Cosmo in Lifeboat 1. Ida and Isidor Straus. Isidor Straus, played by Lou Poulter, was the co-owner of Macy's department store. He married his wife Ida, played by Elsa Raven, in 1871. Ida reportedly refused to board a lifeboat upon finding out that her husband could not board one, and they both died in the sinking. Noelle Leslie, Countess of Roths. Though she's barely in the movie, the Countess of Roths, played by Rochelle Rose, was actually a heroine of the Titanic disaster. She helped steer her lifeboat away from the sinking ship and then to the rescue ship. She was also mentioned in Downton Abbey as being someone that the Crawleys had seen shortly before the sinking. William Murdoch. Portrayed by Ewan Stewart in the film, Murdoch is present on the ship's bridge at the time of impact with the iceberg and gives the orders for hard A starboard and later hard A port, which all occurred in real life. Murdoch did not survive, however, and the circumstances of his death are still subject to controversy. In the movie, Murdoch takes his own life after shooting a third-class passenger to prevent overcrowding around the lifeboats. Although a number of eyewitnesses reported seeing an officer shoot himself, there is no evidence to confirm that it was Murdoch. Today, Murdoch is widely viewed as a hero in his home country of Scotland. Charles Lightoller. The Titanic's second officer, Charles Lightoller, was played by Johnny Phillips in the movie. After the collision, the English sailor took charge of loading women and children into lifeboats, as seen in the film. Lightoller was the most senior crew member to survive the sinking. Not shown in the movie though, he jumped from the Titanic's bridge as the ship plunged beneath the waves and clung to an overturned collapsible before eventually transferring to another lifeboat. Fourth Officer Joseph Boxhall. On the night of April 14th, Boxhall was off duty when he heard the ringing of the lookout bell and First Officer Murdoch calling to turn the ship. Fourth Officer Joseph Boxhall was portrayed by Simon Crane in Cameron's Titanic. When he died in 1967, Boxhall's ashes were spread in the Atlantic Ocean over the location of the Titanic sinking. Fifth Officer Harold Lowe. Fifth Officer Harold Lowe was asleep in his quarters when the Titanic collided with the iceberg. Upon realizing the severity of the situation, the Welshman got up and went to work lowering lifeboats. The film depicts Lowe calling out, "Is there anyone alive out there?" as he helms the boat that rescues Rose from the water. Played by former Fantastic Four star Ioan Gruffudd in the Titanic movie. Henry Wilde. Played by Mark Lindsay Chapman, Henry Wilde was the chief officer on the ship and served on several White Star ships before working his way up to his position on the Titanic. In the film, he can be seen frantically attempting to release a lifeboat as water engulfs the ship, yelling at desperate passengers to get back. After the ship goes down, Wilde clings to a deck chair but later appears dead with a whistle in his mouth, which Rose takes and uses to call Lifeboat 14's attention. The real-life Wilde likely perished similarly in the freezing water. Sixth Officer James Moody. At the age of 24, Moody joined the crew of the Titanic after serving in the British Naval Reserve. In the moments before the collision, Moody answers the frantic call from the crow's nest warning of an iceberg right ahead. In the film, as in real life, Moody assists the launching of lifeboats amid panicked passengers and rising water, but does not board one himself. He was the only junior officer to die in the sinking. Quartermaster George Rowe. He first appears in James Cameron's epic movie when Jack saves Rose from her suicide attempt at the ship's stern. The real-life Rowe assisted in firing flares and sending Morse code messages to alert nearby vessels. Rowe survived the disaster by jumping into the same lifeboat as Ismay. However, he is absent from this scene in the movie. Rowe died in 1974 at the age of 92. Quartermaster George Rowe, played by Richard Graham. Quartermaster Robert Hickens. The English quartermaster was at the ship's wheel when it struck the iceberg. In the movie, Hickens argues with Brown, who urges him to go back for survivors. Hickens angrily refuses, claiming that they will be swamped by passengers trying to climb aboard. Hickens' real-life conduct in the lifeboat had drawn criticism. Hickens' life after the Titanic disaster deteriorated due to alcoholism and loss of work. Actor Paul Brightwell portrayed the real-life character of Robert Hickens in the Titanic movie. Frederick Fleet. Frederick Fleet, played by Scott Anderson, was the lookout who spotted the iceberg that Titanic hit. As depicted in the movie, he really did shout, "Iceberg," right ahead when he saw it.
Iceberg, right ahead!
Fleet survived the sinking and served in World War I and World War II. Fleet died by suicide in 1965, weeks after his wife passed away. Jack Phillips. Portrayed by Gregory Cook, Jack Phillips was the senior wireless operator on board the Titanic. Captain Smith tells Phillips to send out the distress call CQD with the ship's position. Although hardly depicted in the movie following the iceberg collision, the real-life Phillips worked in the operating room with Bride until the ship's final moments. Unlike Bride, Phillips perished in the sinking, as his body was discovered lifeless upon an upturned lifeboat. Harold Bride. Harold Bride, played by Craig Kelly, was the junior wireless operator on board Titanic. Bride worked alongside Jack Phillips, sending out personal messages and receiving navigational information from nearby ships. In the movie, he informs Smith of the message from the Carpathia saying their rescue vessel will arrive in 4 hours. He did survive the sinking and testified during the Senate inquiry about it. Reginald Lee. He stood beside Fleet in Titanic's crow's nest as the iceberg neared, as seen in the film. Lee joined the crew of the Titanic as a transfer from the Olympic. Lee survived the sinking, as he was in charge of Lifeboat 13. He died a year later due to complications from pneumonia. Reginald Lee was portrayed by Martin East. Charles Juffin. In the movie, Juffin can be seen drinking from a flask atop the ship's stern alongside Rose and Jack, moments before the Titanic takes its final plunge. That's his final appearance in the film, though in real life, Juffin settled by the overturned collapsible B before a lifeboat picked him up. Charles Juffin, played by Liam Toohey, was the Titanic's chief baker. Father Thomas Biles. Father Thomas Biles boarded the Titanic in Southampton with plans to officiate his younger brother's wedding in New York. He was scheduled to travel on a different White Star liner but made a last-minute switch to the Titanic as a second-class passenger. Portrayed by James Lancaster in the film, the Catholic priest can be seen leading prayer as the ship goes down. He did not survive the sinking of the ship. Archibald Gracie. Archibald Gracie IV was a writer, real estate investor, and former U.S. Army colonel. In the film, Gracie was portrayed by Bernard Fox. He first appears in the film on the first night of the ship's voyage after Jack saves Rose from nearly jumping overboard. Gracie hails Jack as a hero and says he should be rewarded for his good deed. Gracie escaped death by clinging to the overturned collapsible B, though his health quickly deteriorated as a result and he passed away in December of the same year. Wallace Henry Hartley. One of the most moving scenes from Titanic is when the band continues playing to calm panicking passengers. Violinist Wallace Henry Hartley, played by Jonathan Evans-Jones, really did lead his 8-member band as the Titanic sunk and tragically died in the process. Frederick Barrett. Derek Lea portrayed the Titanic's lead stoker Frederick Barrett in the 1997 film. Among those who escaped the flooding boiler room, as the film shows, Barrett eventually made it to a deck and jumped into lifeboat 13 just as it prepared to lower. Barrett saved roughly 70 others with him when lifeboat 15 nearly crushed them from above. Barrett hurried to cut the falls to free the boat, a scene that appears in the movie. Joseph Bell. Joseph Bell served as the chief engineer in the ship's engine room. Actor Terry Forrestal assumed the role of Bell in Titanic. He can be seen presiding over the boiler room toward the beginning of the ship's voyage and later in the frantic moments before it collides with the iceberg. Bell perished in the sinking. Please give us a like for the video and don't forget to subscribe. We have also uploaded a video about the remarkable transformation of the cast of Titanic film. Please click on the thumbnail to watch that video. See you in the next video soon.